Hey, my name's John, and I'm a human doing. What am I doing today? I decided it was time to finish off the airlines in my garage, and I'm doing it using Pex, something most people don't think of when they're doing airlines, but it actually works really well. And I had a whole bunch left over from a renovation we did in our house, so it really didn't cost me anything with the exception of that little gizmo there, and that's just a reel to hold all the line for the garage portion. I wanted to do that because I like to keep it tucked away, and I was tired of winding it up by hand. So it was a lazy purchase, but something I think I needed. So I hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe. Have any questions? Please post them down below. Thanks very much. Now, before I begin, I should note that I have not shown, or I will not be showing, any rough-ins of the Pex in the walls, and that's just because I did that when I was roughing in everything for the garage when I renovated it, which was several years ago, and I wasn't planning on making a video for YouTube when I did that, so I didn't have the foresight at the time, but it's just Pex and walls, pretty straightforward stuff. But you'll notice I do have an outlet bib on the inside of the garage, but I also wanted one here you can see in the shop. And I did that just because I wanted to keep the areas separate, primarily for dust. So here are the two lines that I'll be running. The one that's further away is for the woodshop, and the one that's closer, that is for the garage. And you'll also notice that I'm cutting it with the Pex sort of cutting tool. Don't use a utility knife. I mean, you can cut it with a utility knife, but you're going to get a much better result with the cutting tool, and it cuts the stuff like butter. It is super easy to use. And you can see a close-up here of the fittings that I've chosen to use. They have a black top, and that top is a stopper, and it just keeps you from putting the fitting in the wrong location. Some brands don't have any kind of stopping system, so you kind of have to guess where to put it. And in this case here, it takes all the guesswork out of it. Super easy to use, and definitely a DIY or just generally a user-friendly system. So very impressed with this system. It works really well. And for air in particular, it's not the first time I've used this for air, and it works flawlessly, really. It's a great system to use. So you can see me crimping here, and that's just a crimping tool. You can get them at any of your local hardware stores, but it does take a little bit of muscle, but not too much. I mean, my 12-year-old daughter, she was out helping me crimp these fittings, and she didn't have any problem squeezing it together, so I'm sure it's not too bad. I know it's a little hard to see, but I'll take this one out just outside in the daylight so you can see what the fitting looks like when it's been fully compressed. You can see it's not misshapen or misformed in any way. So it's so you know it's a good clean crimp. And putting them on, like you can see, it's super easy to slide them in, and you just crimp away. You just want to make sure that the crimper is on both sides. So you want to make sure you're covering the entire that gray crimp nut. You want to make sure you're covering the entire portion of that. You don't want to cover just half of the crimp nut on either side. You want to make sure you're covering the whole thing. So once I got all these nuts crimped, I moved on to a section where I'm not using Pex product. I'm just using air hose. So I had an old sacrificial airline that I chopped up so that I could use it here. And the airline is a smaller ID. I believe it's 3/8 ID, where Pex is 1/2 inch. So I had to use a heat gun to warm it up to wrap it around that T fitting. And I'm just using a standard a hose clamp and tightening it down. I've never had any issues, and I mean I've even after this system's been installed now for about a week, it's on the whole time. No issues, no leaks, so it ends up working pretty well. You can see the line when it's finished. I have the male end here, which is going to connect into my compressor, and this line is going to feed both sides of the garage. So in order to make the hose bib on the garage side look a little bit nicer, I decided to use a cover like you would find in the bathroom for a toilet, and I just scuffed it up with 400 grit sandpaper, sprayed it black, and let it dry. And I thought this would be a more aesthetically pleasing, option than having just sort of a hole in the wall with a pipe hanging through it. So that was my way of fixing that. Now, when it came to the hose reel, I also wanted something that was aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time, I needed something that was just stronger than mounting it directly to the drywall. So I took a piece of scrap plywood that I had, and I just cut it down to size, making sure that it was long enough that I could connect it to two separate studs. The walls are 16 center, so as long as it's greater than that, it was enough for me to make sure it was good and secure. I chamfered the ends. That was just to make it look more finished. And then I applied a coat of just black latex. There was no primer or anything. I wasn't overly concerned with this. I just wanted to paint it black because it matches other stuff in the garage. and that way I had something good and strong to mount that hose reel to. So like I mentioned, it's a simple paint job, nothing fancy, just one coat, no primer. Don't have to get too crazy with this one. This is just, make it black, make it match, and, it'll probably never be noticed again. But once that paint was dry, I just pre-drilled a couple holes. You can see these are for the mounting screws for the hose reel. And on the back side, I used a Forstner bit to countersink those holes to make sure that the screws sit flush, just to make it easier to mount on the wall. Once I get it over there in a moment here, you'll see. You can see it being mounted now. And again, I'm just using a level. Make sure it's nice and level, of course. And I'm drilling it into the studs in the wall. I did use a stud finder to find that. And obviously, if you're going to do that, make sure you're not running into any electrical. So check that ahead of time. So here you can see that flange cover that was painted black a little earlier, and it looks a heck of a lot better than it did with that sort of nasty hole in the drywall, so a little bit cleaner look. It's time to plumb, I guess. Is it called plumbing when you're doing airlines? I'll call it plumb anyway. So it's time to plumb some of these airlines for the hose reel. And same process as before. I'm just using those crimp nuts, crimping them down, and just making sure that the crimper is covering the entire crimping nut to make sure you're getting pressure all the way across. And again, you're seeing a sort of shut-off valve, and that is to help release any moisture that builds up in the system. At some point, I may put some kind of dryer or oiler or whatever in the system, but for the time being, it's just going to be as it is. And the nice thing about the Pex is I can just cut it, put on new fittings, and away I go, and it's a very quick job. I mean, this entire job took me, I'd say, about 2 hours if you don't count some of the paint drying. So not a lot of time at all. It's certainly a super user-friendly system. So for pneumatics in particular, it really works great. And there you can see the finished assembly. So the one thing I need to do now is, like I did earlier, is I'm going to be using a rubber hose, which is going to be connected to the reel. So again, I heat it up one side, and then I connect it with a hose clamp. But I use the rubber hose because the other side, the side that connects to the reel, will have a proper airline barb. You can see the connector that's being tightened right now. The end on that is specifically for pneumatic lines or airlines. So I needed to use the correct hose to connect it to, because Pex will not connect to these hoses properly. So once I screw it down, it's just got a 90-degree elbow fitting. I cut it to length. Now the nice thing is those Pex cutters that cut for the Pex cutting, it works really good on air hose as well. So here you go. You can see me connecting it. And again, I'm using just a standard hose clamp to tighten it down. So this portion of the build is done, and then I can head out into the woodshop. The assembly in the woodshop is really simple. You can see the turn on and off valve there at the bottom. You want to make sure that those valves that if you do put those in, that they are at the bottom of your system, because that's where the water is gonna track to at the very bottom. It's going to follow gravity. But basically, this is just a straight line with my connection bib at the top. And there's just a couple crimp fittings. And I mean, this took all of, I think, 5 minutes to assemble. So really simple, straightforward system, but that's the nice thing about the Pex. If I was using a different system, it would take considerably longer to do. So here you can see the hose reel. If you don't have one of these and you're in your garage a lot, they certainly come in handy. And this one here is a 25-footer. I got it at Princess Auto, which is here in Canada. I guess it'd be like maybe a Pet Boys if you have in the United States. And here's like the release valve again. If there's any moisture, turn it on, turn it off, and your moisture will pop out. I'm using a 30-gallon compressor. It's portable, but only because it's got the wheels. That thing's heavy. And see, it's nice and clean behind the compressor. I've had the system on. I put it on 150 psi just to make sure there were no leaks. And I mean, I didn't lose any pressure overnight, so that's pretty good. You can see here the bib in the shop. And again, if I have any moisture collecting, I can just get it out that way. And this will help keep the hoses off the ground, so it's safer for me and more convenient. Hey, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned that maybe Pex is an option if you are doing airlines and you want a relatively user-friendly experience. Pex is definitely in my opinion anyway, a good option for you to use. So again, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you have questions, just throw them down below and I'll do my best to get back at you. So again, thank you. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.